Hey, hello everybody. Sorry about that. There's a slight technical hitch for those of you who use Crowdcast. So first thing first, I'm gonna apologise. The plan is we've got 8 people today. We've got Neil Harrison from NH237, who's happily on the screen in the middle there. We've got Fiona, who is trying to connect. It says you're trying to connect. She'll be here in a second. We've got Mark, who's on the screen as well. And we've got Glenn, who's very kindly volunteered to drop off. And you can see that he's alive and well because he was the first one to say afternoon, everyone. They're all what I would call employer brand anoraks, nerds. None of them call themselves a ninja, thank God. But that's their bag. From the employer's perspective, we've also got Emma Neary from Moneysupermarket, who I hope you're out there. John Burnet, who's definitely here because we've just seen him. We've got Julie Griggs from Greenhill HR&Talent. And we've got Chris Piercy from AO.com. Chris, you're one of several Chris's. You're going to have to say you're the Chris now on the thing. And what I'm going to do is try and be that awkward hosty with a mosty and bring people in and out so that we can we make sure we get a nice coverage of thing. Actually, what I'm going to do, because I can, as Fiona was struggling to get in, I'm going to bring in at least one of the employers. Oh, Fiona got here just as they booted there. That's rude, wasn't it, Fiona? I really apologise. So slick. Anyway, so I'm going to bring in Emma because I've decided that was going to work really well. So the topic of today is really looking at how we think about employer brand and think about where we are today, the here and now of coronavirus, COVID-19, whatever we like to call it, and the role, I guess, that employer brand has in that holding pattern where some organisations are definitely on hold, they're not doing anything, versus when we come out of that, looking forward and looking to the future, what does the world actually, what's it going to look like? I'm inspired by Neil, very kindly wrote a blog for the R-Tribe website. And this, I guess, is the foundation. This was sort of a follow-on from that. It made sense to do something a bit more than that. So with that in mind, I guess, Neil, maybe it's easy for you to sort of kick off. You wrote the blog. And I guess it's really sort of talking about the inspiration you had behind it and maybe think about where we are as organisations. A lot of it's around brand. And I guess the questions around the value of employer brand is now the time that people are finally going to recognise that there is some value in the employer brand, and that they should invest in it wisely, or they're still going to ignore it and do whatever. I'll shut up.
Yeah, and it could really go one of two ways. I think for me, you've got a situation where budgets are going to be stretched incredibly. Some organisations might take the view that, do we really need an employer brand, or do we need to focus a huge amount of attention and investment in employer brand because is hiring going to be that difficult? Unemployment will be at ridiculous levels soon, whether we like it or not. So that's one side of the argument. The other side is we've seen some organisations emerge in terms of their response to COVID in a fantastic way. So they've absolutely enhanced their employer brand. And there's some what you might call unlikely examples of that. So Timpson's, the key shoe people, they've been absolutely fantastic in so many ways, and it's costing their business a huge amount, but they won't countenance doing anything other than that. There've obviously been some incredibly negative examples of that. I mean, it's probably inappropriate to name names, but we could all probably do that. Sports retailers, pub chains, probably quite high in the list of those. For me, I think whatever organisations do and say, particularly over the course of the next year, maybe more, it's going to be really hard for anyone to separate the way they've behaved and dealt with their people during COVID-19 in terms of their employer brand. So for the likes of the people we've spoken about, so the Timpsons of this world, for example, their employer brand, the way they've dealt with their workforce, it effectively is their brand moving forward, and their brand's been absolutely enhanced as a result of that. So for me, I'm not sure which way it's going to go. It might seem a little bit over the top, but in a lot of cases, an employer brand becomes an organisation's brand, full stop. And in a lot of other cases, you might say, well, sort of an employer brand, we don't have the resources or investment or money to focus anything like what we might do in an employer brand. We're just concentrating on surviving, and there's a massive polar difference. And there's so many kind of about COVID-19. There's so many responses where it's absolutely binary. Most of us are all sitting at home, probably not as much to do as we might like. Some people are absolutely running off their feet. But yeah, for me, which way, and obviously no one knows right now, is an employer brand going to go? Is it going to become far more important than it's ever been because the way organisations responded to COVID-19 is their employer brand, or is it a lot less positive?
That didn't work so well, did it? So what do we think? Oh God, here we go. What do other people? So Emma, I'm going to pick on you only because from a Moneysupermarket perspective, where are you in terms of this is where we are in hiring, this is what we're doing, this is where we've got to, and how much sort of thought about the future have you put in as an organisation?
Yeah, good question. We paused hiring just as we went into lockdown. We managed to commit to everybody who had been offered a role with us to continue with that, and we succeeded in getting the kit out to them. So we had everybody who's been onboarded remotely up until the 1st of June. Since then, we've only had a couple of roles, and we're just taking it every couple of weeks, to be honest, talking to the exec, looking at the opportunities. You know, we've kind of mapped out the roles that are sort of critical and those that we need to pipeline for. But I think what's been really interesting is the prioritisation that the business has had on our people. And for us, it's a really interesting time because we have been doing a big piece of work on our employer brand. We hadn't done anything previously. We've got 4 different sub-brands. And it's been a real test to see, is what we said that we're going to go out to the market with, is it correct? And I have been absolutely kind of overwhelmed with how positively the business and our colleagues have responded. And I think that's what's been really interesting. We've seen very naturally people talking and sharing their stories about what it's like to work here and how well the business has responded, but also preempted a lot of these challenges. And we talk about, you know, inclusion and belonging and really kind of putting everything, you know, building everything around our colleagues. And I have to say we're doing that fantastically. And it's been, you know, through my career, a really, you know, strong piece of evidence of a company that's brand. For me, it's kind of been tested, but it's really showcasing very authentically what it is to work within our business. And hopefully that will be recognised. And
was that all sort of organic, for one of it, where did people sort of naturally feel that they could contribute and feel that they did want to provide you those stories? They were happy to talk about it. It became authentic there, that sort of holy grail of employer brand, isn't it?
It is. I mean, look, what's happening now is just colleagues doing things off their own back on LinkedIn and things. We do struggle, you know, talent acquisition in the sense that we have it within the group is relatively new. We frighten the life out of people if we ask them for video content or a blog or whatever. Yeah. So that's why it's been really nice to see this sort of happen. But I think it does tie into something else that I've seen in terms of colleagues' willingness to contribute. So, you know, we have floor briefs, I'm sure, you know, every company out there has their own version. Pre-COVID in the office, you wouldn't get much interaction from people. Now we've moved to online, we're getting a lot more people turn up for them and a lot more questions and people seeking kind of certainty in a very uncertain time. So it has been really interesting and you know, the brand side of things is hugely important for us. We haven't paused it. We are continuing to move forward and launch in a few weeks' time.
Interesting.
And Emma, can I ask, in terms of some of the findings, some of the stories that your guys have created during the lockdown, are they forming part of that brand content strategy, or are you reverting back to the content you'd created presumably just before COVID?
They will do. So the thinking has evolved a little bit around that. As I say, this is all very new for us. Our priority right now is getting the right messages. And actually, we've had the sense check of the messages. They're really, you know, we're living and breathing them. We have a little bit of work to do with the content and how we push that out because we're quite a lean team. It's driven by talent acquisition at the moment. and we're at the very beginning of the journey really with our colleagues to sort of formalise that. So that will come in time, but what we have recognised is that we need to provide more information for sort of potential candidates out there to kind of answer a lot more questions that they will have and give them that sort of security and human touch that, you know, they won't get if we just take what we used to do and move it to online and video interviewing, for example.
Mm-hmm.
I think words like security are going to be so much, if indeed they are possible for any employer to communicate to people. I mean, can you see whether it's about values, whether it's about the culture of the organisation moving forward? Do you see that changing? Do you see that impacted hugely by COVID, or is it as much as you can foresee back to business as usual?
I don't think we'll see it changing. Yeah, I mean, I think the real positive for us is we've done so much work over the last 18 months around kind of inclusion and belonging and making sure that people feel that they can have a voice and they will be listened to, and really understand that as a business we care about our people. Now, some of the things that we've looked at recently is we've been fortunate we haven't gone down the furlough route. However, we have our own scheme funded by the company, which is what's it called, the COVID Care Fund, which people can apply to, and it's exactly the same as they would get through the government. So they won't be any worse off. And we went straight to much greater degrees of flexibility for our colleagues, which is, you know, quite a step away really for us as a business, which has historically been largely office based. You know, but people can flex their time and sort of do what they can when they can, acknowledging that it's very unusual and different people have different kind of priorities and circumstances at home that are impacting on their work. And you know, we've been so sort of close to that over the last 18 months, and everything that we're learning and the feedback we've had from the engagement survey, which was released last week, you know, this is resonating really well with our colleagues. So it's something to build on.
I think it's for you and whoever you work with. I think it's a real testament that you've gone through this kind of discovery journey, and we overuse in this industry words like authenticity, but hopefully an employer brand is all about or has an element of that. But there's no better test of authenticity when you guys or anybody goes through what we've all gone through, because that's the real test of whether an organisation is delivering what it says it's going to. So for me, it's a real feather in your cap that actually, having just gone down EVP creation, attaching stories to it, actually, do you know what? When the shit hits the fan, it does really work. And actually what we've been saying does actually play out.
Yeah, absolutely. We're very lucky, and that's the message our colleagues are giving us. You know, when they're sharing content, they're saying how proud they are to work here. And as you say, you know, you can talk a good game, but do you actually deliver? And you know, I think it's changed the way a lot of our colleagues feel about the business, just seeing how much empathy and understanding they have for our colleagues.
Mark, you obviously deal with a number of different organisations. What's been the feeling from your current clients, prospect clients, etc.? What are they doing? Are they sort of, I guess, a mixture of digging their head in the sand and going, we don't know what to do? Because again, we've all been through that at some point. And is there, I guess, those sort of glimmers of hope that people are starting to sort themselves out and think, actually, this is the new normal. This is what we're going to go and do. What's the sort of feeling you've got?
So many questions.
So many questions, so little time. I know. It's almost like I
think it kind of depends on sector to sector. I think some areas of retail, for example, have been more affected than others. Going back to a point that Neil was making before, is that I first of all, even as an employer brand agency, we don't create employer brands. You know, an employer brand is your reputation as an employer. And I don't think that there's been any time in recent memory that's been as important right now for maintaining your reputation as an organisation. I think Neil said it. Effectively your employer brand is your brand at the moment. How you treat people or how you treat your people is going to define the way that people think about your organisation for quite a long time to come. And to the point where people are running TV adverts, which is not about the products that they sell, it's about the way that they are treating their people and the respect that they have for the wider community around them. They know, clever organisations know how important a period of time this is, both commercially and for their reputations as an employer. And I think that's the most thing, is the fact it's about reputation right now. It's about maintaining your reputation as an employer. And I think, as Neil's already said, reputations are being destroyed, but also some reputations are being enhanced. And the work that we are doing, and I mean we as in the sort of the talent acquisition community, is about amplifying the great things that we're doing to make sure that those messages are reaching wider people. So if you are in a position where you are able to bypass the government furlough scheme and take that investment on yourselves, well, that's a great story, and one that I hadn't heard before. And thank you for sharing it. I think it's fantastic, because I think that is something that's going to enhance your reputation as an employer. And that for me at the moment, but also, and so going back to employer brand activity, to a certain extent, in my opinion, we've got to put all those kind of messages to one side at the moment. And it's about being kind, it's about being thoughtful, it's about understanding the situations that people are in, it's about protecting your people as much as you possibly can do. Some of our clients' sort of core EVP messages are around things like stability and security. Well, the reality is that they can't guarantee that right now. So there's no point sharing those messages. They would love to, but situations have taken over them that they can't share that right now. But what they can share is the way that they treat their people and the way that they are protecting their people as much as they possibly can do. And I think that for me is hopefully what is going to maintain the good companies' reputations. Does that answer your question, Ryan?
It does. It tells me yes. It's that mix of, I guess, there's always a little meme of something, isn't it, about what did you do during the coronavirus, and that first question being most prominent in people's interview things. I'm going to bring in show randomly. I feel like having invited loads of people to come along. Hey? You
can kick me out.
I'm going to kick you out for a bit. I am going to kick you out for a bit, and I'm going to bring in Chris, the real Chris, because he is the Chris, having made sure he is the Chris. Let me just boot Chris. So Chris is from AO.com, for those of you who don't know him, and I will just magic him into the screen. Yes, there we go. And whilst that's happening, I'll sing a song or do something else. The thing that, Emma, that you picked up on, and so we were talking around this being sort of based broadly on Neil's blog. One of the things he did talk about was those people stories. Do you see that element now? You've got some almost authentic engagement, that people were willing to do things off their own bat. You didn't have to go and tell them. I'm assuming the answer is yes. You're going to be able to go in the future and go, hey, everybody, how you did in the bad times you wrote this stuff. Now times are better. Is that very much part of, do you think, of your future plan and how you're going to engage with both current employees and candidates?
Yes, it is. Sort of aspirationally, we need to have more focus on the type of content that we want to put out there. We're very mindful of kind of how we do that at the moment. And there are certain kind of themes that we want to focus on at the right time. So it will definitely be something. It's just given me a lot more confidence and that real kind of encouragement that there will be probably some greater take up from the business. I think because of this situation that we necessarily sort of anticipated. It's just not something that we're in a position to, or perhaps would want to kind of jump on too much right now.
Which makes sense, I think. Yeah,
it's a lot to do with trust. It's a lot to do with trust for me. So, given what we've gone through, what your people have gone through, and the way that you guys obviously have responded, there must be a huge amount more trust between employee and employer. So the confidence, I think you mentioned that word as well, the confidence that your people have to express themselves, to be open, to be transparent, perhaps tell some very personal stories about their experiences during lockdown and the way that you guys helped them out. That can only continue when this thing starts to lift. But I think you've given yourself, not just in terms of engagement, but also in terms of kind of tenure and commitment and productivity. You've created such a momentum in terms of what you can get from your people. I think it's massively important. One of the other points to emerge from this is in terms of employer branding and candidate audiences. So if you take your audience, Emma, your internal people there, they're unlikely to want in the short term to want to go anywhere because of what you guys have done for them, that sense of trust and confidence. I think what I'm really interested in generally is, what do employers have to do more of in order to attract candidate audiences, given that people are likely to be cautious and wary, unemployment's likely to go through the roof. What do employers, though, who are still recruiting, have to do more of in order to create that sense of reassurance?
I sort of can answer what we're thinking about. We're not actively, as I say, recruiting a huge number, but we are preparing ourselves. So we've gone through a bit of a mapping exercise, sort of putting ourselves in the candidate's shoes to say, okay, well, what would they be thinking at this time? What concerns might they have? And be able to kind of draw up those answers and provide a bit of a platform for them, and be able to communicate that in different ways. So, I think that's kind of the one thing. But then the second is about, how do you bring to life the teams that they will be joining if everything is going to be done remotely? It can't just be, and this is a bit of an education journey we will need to go on. It can't just be, we're going to do a video interview like we always do. Well, no, who's the team that they're going to be working with? This is a really big decision for people, whether they're in employment or not. There's still got to be the right fit. So we're also looking at a set of principles to help managers with that, and some additional training to support them through remote hiring.
What about you, Chris? As I brought you on, obviously, so if people don't know, Chris is the TA manager at AO.com. You've actually, as a business, based on, certainly in the first few weeks of lockdown, business was booming, to be really honest. You were probably overwhelmed with activity. Where are you now? I mean, I know you had one of your biggest white goods sale days ever.
So we're in a really fortunate position, obviously being fully online, and it was quite funny how we saw the trends go from, like you say, everyone wanting to stockpile, a massive increase in fridges and freezers. Then all of a sudden lockdown comes in, so everyone needs to work from home, laptops, printers, everything like that then starts selling out. And then all of a sudden everyone's getting bored, so then the PlayStation. So there's been a real trend, and it's fortunately been really busy for us. And we cut a big, or sort of re-justified and re-reviewed the vacancies that we had. So across the group, we probably had around 200 vacancies, 250 vacancies. We cut that by about 50% and deemed what was kind of more business critical, which still left us with quite a high proportion of vacancies to recruit for. So it's given us a bit more time to work on some of the more project-based stuff around our assessment methodology, how we recruit remotely and track against what them metrics that matter are. But it's, I think, a really important thing for us has been around that, and you alluded to it earlier, around that communication with candidates around what's expected of them throughout this whole remote experience, and how do we give them the best insight into what life was like, but is going to be like, if we know what it's going to be like. So we have to have a look at what, and I'm sure every company is looking at this right now, is life after lockdown, what that looks like and what we've learned from lockdown. So we were in conversations about remote work, and actually we're just not there yet. We're not ready for it. We're maybe a year or two off a company being able to be remote, and then all of a sudden, weeks later, we're a fully remote company. So it's understanding how we learn from that, and what upskilling needs to be done in regards to our hiring managers and the teams and how we embed people and onboard people. So that's a really big challenge, and there isn't. I haven't got like an answer for that at the minute, because I don't think anyone has that answer until you start to learn about what it's going to be like. But anything around any of the tools that we can use around Slack, I know there's some companies that use the donut feature on Slack around like these coffees with a stranger within the team and meeting some of the rest of your team and networking before you've even joined. So it's going to be a huge challenge, but an exciting one at the same time.
Do you think it actually creates an opportunity? Again, I tend to think that, when I think about, as you know, I go into different organizations, I tend to work in a bit of a bubble, a bit of a silo. Do you think actually by default, because people are remote, it's easier to almost do that networking across an organization because they don't physically have to go up the way and round the corner into a different building or a different whatever? They can just be, we've just booked you in, you're just going to have a chat, and it's going to be this groups, almost diverse groups of people. Does that...
Hopefully, I think that's still going to be a challenge.
Yeah.
One thing I have seen internally with AO is how much more I've got to know other colleagues from different areas and worked with them a lot closer. Whereas when you're in the office, it just becomes I'll deal with that. Yeah, sorry, go. But when you're all in a challenging situation where you've got to be flexible and adaptable, there's that extra care comes out in everyone, and you do get to know your colleagues a bit more. You do take time to understand how they're feeling and how they're getting on, how are their families. You might ask that in the normal office environment as a courtesy, but actually at a time like now, this is when it really
You think people are actually asking because they really genuinely want to know, rather than just
absolutely. And I think that just brings teams together more and companies and businesses together. So I think one of the most important things after lockdown is how do you continue that? And with that, because you don't want to go down that whole forced fun element, but how do you make it natural, like it has become in the pandemic that we're in?
Yeah, I did. I ran a vaguely unofficial poll on LinkedIn a couple of weeks ago now, and I just asked people when you return to whatever normality is, do you want to return to a better workplace, a better workforce, or do you just want to return to normality? I thought it'd be sort of 50-50, but it was staggering the amount of people. I think it was 75-25 that people wanted to return to a workforce that was better, more respectful, more civilized, treated people better, given what their experiences over the last 6 weeks had been. I thought it was really interesting. I thought self-interest might kick in there and people just want to return and start earning money and carrying on as normal. But no, I think it's raised the bar of expectations, I think, for a lot of people.
I'm thinking we're going to go next now. You can tell my brain's starting to think again. Conscious again because of the power of Crowdcast. Emma, I'm going to park you. I'm going to bring John in, but don't go away, if that makes sense. I'm going to keep Chris there. Yeah, and we're going to cycle around. And if we've got time, so it's only halfway through, I'm probably going to do that once more time. So let me just through the power of that. Why can't I get rid of you? How bizarre! I can't get rid of Emma. There we go. I'm just going to bring John in as well. Chatting amongst yourselves, I hope people, because this is the value of almost like a live thing. There we go. Look at that. He says John will be here momentarily. So John, there he is. John is special. So John works for Thoughtworks. So do any of the conversation we had so far? I've got Moneysupermarket with. I guess their employer brand, their real brand is becoming as one. They're in a lucky position. They can be seen to be doing the right thing. It's authentic. They've not been furloughing people. They've been paying for them out of their own funds. They've got a workforce that feels engaged and willing to do things. What's your experience been so far at Thoughtworks?
Yeah, really good comments so far, both from Chris and Emma, and lots that resonates as well. I think, from our perspective, transparently, we have furloughed some people. We are a professional services business, for those who don't know who Thoughtworks are. So Many are very, very clever people, lots cleverer than myself, typically working on client site, transformational projects that could be, typically long, big, established relationships. So we've had to completely flip our business model and how we actually engage with clients. So, there's the kind of smaller practicalities of what we've been forced into doing. But I think what it's provided us with is a huge opportunity to look at how we engage with clients in the future. Because typically it is client site, as I said, face to face, lots of stickies on a massive wall, paired programming way within 2 meters separation, and all these kind of things that, in the world after this are going to have to be adjusted. So I think in terms of what we have done, we've paused hiring. I was one of the few who responded to the poll. So we've paused, although globally in some regions it's continuing. Key roles, again, as Emma was saying, some roles may be still open, but in the UK we're paused because I think we're taking it as an opportunity to, where best can, look after our people, right? Before we can progress, move forward, continue to build, we need to look after our own, and actually look at what are the skill sets, capabilities, and shape of business do we need to tackle the future. So we have made a decision actually to bring everyone back from furlough as of the 1st of June, which is awesome. And actually, interestingly, and this hopefully can be a powerful external lens in, I suppose, to the way we work and way we think, but it was out of fairness. It's not necessarily because we have a perfectly shaped role on a client engagement for said individual. It's actually because, other than Germany and UK from a global perspective, no other country has such a scheme in place to offset and support from a cost perspective. But what we recognise, whilst we've still got a crazily good top-up scheme, that no one goes below a minimum of 80% of their typical salary, and that's got no cap. So there's some big earners, as you can imagine, that have been protected there, which is awesome. From a fairness perspective, everyone's coming back to get back to 100% pay, and largely invested in internal projects, initiatives, and kind of all hands on deck from a new bids perspective, from a rotation perspective on clients, and like I say, lots of internal opportunity too.
Do you think, I mean, it's difficult, probably a difficult question to answer because I don't think there's an answer, but is there a pressure, I'm just going to give you and Chris on the screen still, is there a pressure from your business to get back to normal? I mean, I there's a client of mine, for example, has said, they're going to go back to working from the office from the 1st of July. Now, they don't know that that's the case, but they keep almost moving this date. There's this desire almost to say, well, that's when normal comes in again. Are you under pressure in the same regard, almost to get back to normal? And is there such a thing? Because again, as you say, some organisations are saying, well, we didn't think we could be remote. Well, the world didn't fall apart, and actually, in some cases, it's got better. So maybe we should have done this a little bit. So maybe what our new normal isn't the same normal that we thought it was. It isn't actually back to how it was. So maybe open to you and Chris around what are the drivers internally around this being this new shape of something to come? Is everyone expecting it to be the same, or are they genuinely taking the time to think we could be doing something a bit better?
Yeah, Chris, do you want to say that?
9 questions. I've learned actually. Mark's right. What I asked 9 questions in one.
So okay, for us then, I don't know. There isn't a pressure for us to go back to normal because I don't think normal is ever going to be the same, or at least not for our company. I think the pressure comes in how do we take what we've learned and how do we get them efficiency wins? And ultimately, there's a big thing that ties in for us as well is how do we make it, however we change, to be inclusive. So what we've learned a lot from in lockdown recently is a lot around the flexibility of obviously location and remote working, but actually, do we really need whatever role we advertise? Should we really be giving a location on that? Can that option be to work from one of our other offices or from home or from wherever it is that they want to be? So I think the pressure now is actually how do we make it work? How do we integrate people back into whatever life after lockdown is? And then what are the consistent approach and the processes for the wider group? Because we know that for some areas of the business, the people team, tech, there's probably a faster adaptability to being able to work remotely, but actually, can we do that in our contact centre? Can we remain remote in our contact centres, in our sales environments, across the whole business? So I think, again, it goes back to what's fair and what makes sense more than anything.
I mean, that's probably one of the debates. And again, coming back to sort of the main event of employer brand, I've not seen anybody go out and actively say, you know what, I mean, so we've had the headlines from Twitter, nobody's going to work from an office ever again. We're going to be remote one day, et cetera, et cetera. And whether they mean that or whether they're not, I don't know. It's a brilliant headline. It was like, oh, wow, I wish I worked at Twitter. Aren't you amazing? I mean, talk about one simple line. I mean, I could say, well, my business, we all work from home. There we go. Well, we do anyway, so it didn't make an awful lot of difference. What I've not seen yet is people, and maybe it's just too soon, is to think about that next step. As you say, you've touched on it yourself, you've got contact centres, whether that suddenly opens up opportunity, because we've been so tied to a location. The contact centres by default, you will be sat in this office. And if I think about some of the big ones, and this is, me and Chris, we're both in Manchester. O2 have got a giant contact centre. Virgin Media have got a big contact centre, and then we're talking about sort of thousands of people sat in seats. Do we think that now suddenly that will change? And we've always talked about flexibility. So there's working mums, etc., who genuinely want some flexibility, who don't want to work full time, and this absolutely lends itself to that because they can work near enough full time. Or people with disabilities that have been excluded from the workplace. Is this suddenly now the moment for some organisations to shine and actively pursue that? Or do we just think again, we'll just get back to normal and go, thank God we're back to where we were, rather than trying to do almost like push the boundaries again?
Yeah, I'll just good comments from Chris, and similarly as well. And to that point around inclusivity and maybe talent pools or a slice of the market you've not been able to touch, to engage with for the right reasons, and probably self-qualifying out, but equally not people who would fit the life of a consultant, for example. I mean, use the term road warrior, but pretty much every first engagement for a process at Thoughtworks, as painful as it is to do so, it's getting people to think if consultant life is for them. It could mean 5 days a week in a hotel up in Glasgow, and yet home base for them could be outside London, for example. So we're dotted all around the country, and ultimately we need that flexibility of our talent to be left, right and centre, and actually removing that barrier from a initial conversation, engaging people in process to say location doesn't matter anymore. If we can get to that point, that will be unreal. And I think not just from a talent market, but also furthering diversity and inclusion within our business of, like I say, talent that we've not been able to do so maybe as much as we would like. So I think the location piece, the acceleration I think that we've made in considering remote or portions of the workforce being able to work remotely, there's been lots of doom and gloom from this, but also the opportunity and the eyes open wide of what could be possible has been, a really interesting, piece for us.
I had a conversation, I won't name names because actually somebody will get me to name, Sam will tell me to name names. I talked about this, the idea of remote. So obviously I live in Manchester. Most of my working life has been in London. And I said, so you don't care where I am anymore, which means when you come to talk about money, it doesn't matter. You're just paying for my skill wherever I am. Whereas, and instantly I was shut down. It's like, no. We'd always pay more for people in London. It's like, why? Well, because they've got a higher cost of living. Yeah, well, that's not my fault. That's their choice. But equally, the people that live in London by default because there was work in London, well, I don't need to live in London. They can go live, me and Chris in the north, and have a lovely life in the sunshine. Whereas, do we think that's going to change as well? Do we think that not only that, let's look at our workforce and think about how diverse we can be. Do you think we'll see a leveling of genuine skills-based packages, rather than just purely I can pay less in the northwest, I can pay less in Scotland, I have to pay more for the southeast and more for London? What do we think?
I hope that what it will show is, so a lot of the conversation I'll have is very much tech focused, which is a big thing, what we recruit and my background as well.
And really relevant though, because the tech market is so competitive. You continuing having a conversation of skill and money and skill, that trigger all the time. So,
and what I think what will happen is you'll see bigger pools of businesses growing outside of London now, so not necessarily having to go to London to get the talent pool that they need. So we already know that in the Northwest, it's become quite a tech spot outside of London, but actually what's to stop places like Newcastle and Hull and wherever it might be for businesses to open up offices there if they adapt and have that flexibility around how and where they employ.
I mean, it's yeah. I'm cynical. I wonder if we just go back to type, based on the fact that that people will still find it easier to do that. To again have that location based of I'm paying for this in the market. It's almost that where they live is become critical still, because it's always been a critical.
The whole issue about location is fascinating anyway, because we think that as and when we go back to work, there will be social distancing happening in an office environment anyway. So effectively, to get the same amount of people in an office, the office has to grow. You have to take more space because people have to be that for either you have a strange system of different timings you work around, or what. I can see which way is it going to go. Will there be far less focus around head offices? Will organisations actually say, do you know what, we want far fewer permanent headcount there and have more gig working, consultancy based arrangements? And actually, yeah, you can. It's not so much whether your head office should be in Newcastle, but do you need a head office there anywhere, whether it's London, Newcastle, or Manchester? So many things are up for grabs right now.
Yeah, it's tricky, isn't it? I said, again, my personal experience, nobody's ever asked, is that still there's always been up until now that blocker that said, yeah, I've had conversations with people like, I live in Manchester, how will you ever make that work? How will you be here 5 days a week? It's like, well, I'll just be there. I just always have done. It's a no-brainer. But genuinely the idea that you don't have to be, and it's always been there. And I mean, funny, I can do a whiteboard sticky note exercise using a bit of tech. I don't have to physically be there. And we get as much out of that. And actually, conversely, bring in a wider audience because we can do it with a true international audience, whereas people tend to think of, I've got to be in a room to make that happen. I'm conscious of the time because I also make sure that we sort of run to time. People are still here, which is good news, and there's lots of commentary going on the thing. I'm going to boot you, Chris, out. I'm going to boot you, John, out. I'm going to say, just park yourself over there, and I'm going to bring in Julie. And perhaps we'll talk then. And whilst, yes, I'll tell you what we're going to bring on Julie. So bring in Julie. So just park yourself for a second. Don't go away. Let me get rid of you. He says through the slickness of Crowdcast. Let me get rid of you. Get rid of you. Oh, get rid of you. There we go. Let's bring in Julie. You're on your way if you are. And I'm also going to bring in Fiona as well because she was very patiently. There we go. Fiona, I've invited you as well. So, look at that. It all works in the end, doesn't it? So, Fiona, I'm going to apologise because I booted you out the minute that you arrived first time round. And I also apologise for using Crowdcast again. Just as a quick summary, because now's a really good moment for me to sort of pause. So our tribe is hosting this. This is the talent sessions for Manchester. There are 3 talent sessions. There's one in Manchester, there's one in Leeds, there's one in Berlin. But because of the power of online, whilst I've kept them separate, they are a broad-based thing. And I'm going to try and see what we do with that. In the olden days, the talent sessions used to run every 2 months or so, and physically get in a room and typically meet for a sandwich or a drink. And one day, come the revolution, we're all back in the room, we'll make sure we're going to get back onto that as well. But the plan is very much to have this on a regular, ongoing basis. So I will say to anybody wants to think of a topic or host a session or do something or give me a kick up the arse to go and do something with it, then absolutely come and do that. It's part of a wider sort of community-based thing that I'm trying to create and build. So hello, Julie, how are you? And hello, Fiona, how are you?
Hello.
Yay, the sound works, it's good. Again, I guess Fiona, maybe you work for Chatter. What's the common thread from your clients? Where are they in their terms of engagement? I'm thinking more of that sort of future stuff as well that says, the past is past and we're done. And we've been sitting within a lockdown environment for X number of weeks. are they starting to have those conversations which says, actually, I'm in a holding pattern, or I'm definitely hiring, or I'm doing something different? Where are they with you?
So, yeah, I mean, I think as a few people have said already, it is a mix, definitely, depending on what's happened to each business throughout lockdown. So we've got clients, we've got food retailers like Morrison's and Asda, who we work with, who clearly have been rushed off their feet and, had to do massive hiring, particularly in the first couple of weeks of lockdown. And then we've got other businesses where they have furloughed their entire people team and have been doing nothing. We've got a few clients who sort of sit in a middle ground, so transportation clients in particular, where being government backed, they haven't furloughed anyone, but they have had more time on their hands. So we've been able to actually progress some interesting sort of insight and research driven employer brand projects with them, because actually once you get around the fact of we're not in a room together and you use technology, you can actually start some of those kind of collaborative processes in a virtual environment. So, and they've got the time and capacity to do it. So each of those kind of strands are coming back into the workplace in quite a different way. So obviously it's kind of front and center for us in terms of what are people doing, or what are their plans, what are their challenges moving forwards. And whether that's bringing people back from furlough in a good way, whether it's bringing people just back from working from home or not, or keeping them working from home and continuing that remote working that wasn't possible. I mean, I think it's fairly self-evident to all of us that we're not all going to suddenly 100% be back in the office anytime soon. So even when we start to perhaps have those non-essential roles that do start to go back to a more collaborative space, it's not going to be with all of your people. It's going to be in sort of smaller cohorts so that you can socially distance. And then, so everyone's got a kind of a return in some way, whether they've been working or not. And then the other thing that's really starting to come up, obviously, is that around sort of redundancy and exit.
The good news is I know that Julie has got sound. If you're any doubt, we know you're alive. Because
obviously some businesses, unfortunately, are going to end up contracting as things return to normal, and are going to have to lose people from the business. So how do you do that in a way that enhances the employer brand? How do you take that potentially negative experience, but make sure that that it isn't negative and it is a really positive? It's about supporting the business and making sure that the reputation that people have and the experience, which for me is absolutely at the heart of employer brand. And I mean, everything that Emma's talked about with Moneysupermarket is, the people have had a good experience. So that's where the authenticity comes from. And I think that's the same when you're exiting people as well, because those people are going to be the ones talking about your employer brands when they move on to their next employer and go out into the marketplace. So yeah, I think the challenges are out. I mean, that is the hot topic at the moment, isn't it? That kind of thing.
I mean, that's it. Me being the cynic, I think that's what we're coming to next, isn't it? We've had a holding pattern. Furlough has helped some organisations to survive, but the reality is they're not back to normal yet. And with the decline in the payments they're going to get, they're going to have to release people if they've not done already. Yeah. So we're into that next wave of genuine challenge for organisations as they contract. I mean, this week Rolls-Royce announced 9,000 job losses, etc. No surprise, to be honest, but it's still not what people want to hear. Is that all? So Uber have been used as sort of this slightly not in a shining light, but they've been advertising very much about they've released a load of people, and people have almost saying, "Oh yeah, it was okay," and you've been hearing people sort of ex-Uber employees saying, "Actually, you've been treating me okay." Do we feel that that's almost an opportunity to build a brand, because they've got a really slightly shaky reputation, to be really blunt?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I think the good example that stuck out for me was Airbnb, where their CEO sent an open letter that was published to all employees, but was very much about talking to the people who were being let go and about how they would help and support them into their next role, and that the business would back them. And I think that's the sort of thing that businesses absolutely have the opportunity to do well. You can't help the fact that you're going to have to make redundancies, you're going to have to let people go. That's out of your control. That's down to the economy. But you can help the way you do it. And we've seen other examples, and again, I won't name names, where it's been in the media before employees have found out about it, which is, it's a terrible experience. And for those people facing that loss of income, that's a horrible place to be in. So, that communication with your people, putting them first, making sure that, yes, it's a commercial decision, but you're actually putting people and and seeing your people as real people, human beings with lives outside of work, and realizing the consequences of that commercial decision on those people, I think is really key to that. I think you really will see coming out of this that those businesses that are genuinely people first, put their people at the heart, are the ones who are going to rise to the top, and the ones who've talked about it in the past and had nice shiny employer brand campaigns and said how great they are, but then have actually treated their people really badly. People aren't going to be fooled in the future.
I mean, that's the thing, isn't it? But again, I guess it's the common theme, isn't it? Back to authenticity and about your brand and your employees, and how people will be held accountable, probably more so than ever, about how you dealt with the bad situations as well as the good. I think we're all very good. Organisations got it wrong when they were hiring, and it was all great, and they still got it wrong. So given that some bad things are happening as well. So I'm conscious with 10 minutes to go. I was going to try and wrap up actually with a question, because I think the question will go through that 10 minutes. I guess the main question I was thinking of is back to your point. Neil, you raised it in your blog originally, of what does the future workplace actually look like? And I guess for this topic, this group as well is, and what role does employer brand play in that? How do we define what the workplace looks like? How do we communicate what it looks like? And how do we make it all authentic and real? And that's, again, 9 questions in one. And if I whiz around the three of you, and then I'll probably get John and Emma and Julie. Can you speak?
I can now.
Yay, good. Just talk about, but get the other guys, perhaps maybe just put some commentary and just think about what the workplace looks like. So Fiona, what do you think? You work for an SME. Chatter on a huge business, you're a successful business. Huge. What does your future workplace look like?
So I mean, for us at Chatter, I think it's going to be very much about using the space we have to be collaborative and not just to go in and work. We're all kind of like, what is the point of sitting in traffic, commuting, just to be at your desk and sat in front of your laptop all day, when you could just do that from home and use the time more productively? So if you are going to travel, if you are going to come into this, or obviously we also spend a lot of time at clients' offices, there's got to be a real purpose to that. And I think in the future, I think a lot of businesses will really just think much more carefully about how we break up our day, how we break up our week, and how we spend our time, to make sure that we're not just doing things because it's the way we've always done it. So yeah, I think that's definitely going to be biggie for us moving forward, is making sure that we use our time wisely.
Yeah. Julie, we've not heard much from you, and that's because of your technical difficulties. One of the things we're going to come back to, but not today, will be around, so you've obviously just recently left MMU, talking about maybe that early talent piece. We haven't really had a chance to cover that today. We will come back to that, because to me there's an underlying thing of, again, if we're not hiring right now, there's a whole bunch of people leaving university as we speak. That traditional milk round for, so that is enterprise organizations, that sort of let me go and find a job piece, is probably challenged, and going to be, is it almost, to me, it's like another little bubble waiting to burst at some point in the next sort of 3 to 4 months probably. What, from your perspective, having obviously spent time there and looking at other organizations, what do you see the future workplace looking like? And I guess, what's the role in the brand? How do organizations communicate, this is what our place is going to look like? Because I think some have struggled with that.
Oh, it's always a huge question, isn't it? What's the future of work going to be like? And I think one of the things that I'm always conscious of when we talk about what's the future of work like is that we often talk about that with our own lens. And I think sometimes we think about it from a very specific perspective from our own experience, think about it from an office-based perspective. But I think one of the key things thinking generally about the future of work is, if we look at every sort of organisation, from the traditionally office-based organisation, to the educational establishment, to somewhere that's more manufacturing-based, you've got a whole different range of employment experiences in there. So it's not one size fits all. We can't suddenly say that flexibility for everybody, flexibility is baked into the kind of offering. So I think for me, in terms of the future of work, I think one of the things I'd like to see more of is more dialogue with employees about how they want to work up front. How do you want to structure this role? How can we design this role? And from one of the organisations I've been working with, that's something they've been focused on, because they've naturally not been able to actually go out to market and recruit because of their financial situation. So they've been looking at job design. How can they work with the people that they've already got within their organisation to design roles differently, use different skills? How can they reskill people? So I think there's a piece around that internal mobility piece and that internal piece. How do you keep people within your organisation and keep them connected to your message and what your core purpose is? So I think that's one thing. I think the other thing for me that I think we're starting to see more of, and if we think about all the different sorts of organisations, is getting away from thinking of well-being as something that's quite fluffy and is centred around yoga mats. I think we're starting to see the hard-edged, if you like, return on investment for well-being. So what does well-being look like in terms of how our people feel, how our people are connected, but also those other well-being aspects, things that we're looking at, such as financial well-being, which has been really key at the moment in terms of organisations and how can organisations play a part in people's financial well-being, because obviously that's got big impact on your performance and how you work within the organisation. I think I've probably not answered your question there, Martin.
No, but you have, because I think you raised a really valid point about the definition of work. Because if we see it very much, you work in an office, you do these things, you need to be based in Reading, and it doesn't necessarily have to play out that way anymore. I think I'm also to Fiona, your point about thinking about the investment that people will now, having spent so much time not commuting. I can't imagine. It was funny. This morning, I thought about it. My phone reminded me I should be in Nottingham because of a meeting, which obviously isn't happening. I'm not going to. But it reminded me at 5:30 because it said I was running late and get going. Well, 5:30 in the morning, and Neil knows me for years. I'm not great at 5:30 in the morning, but I used to do that on a really regular basis. But it's miserable as hell. Probably by about until I get to Nottingham about 8:30. My God, I've spent 3 hours of my morning already just being miserable with people. Whereas now I don't have to do that. And there is some benefit to everybody around me that I don't have to do that. And I wonder if that's the other thing that hopefully organisations will come to that.
Yeah. I think it's a big part of it. And also that kind of that geography in general, that whole idea that talent is going to become more dispersed across the country. Job opportunities are going to be available regardless of where you're based. Because actually, why, like you say, why get up at 5:30 in the morning because you need to commute to London or Leeds? It's when you look at it objectively, it's nonsensical.
Bonkers, but again,
and when you think about well-being and mental health and physical health, again, weeks where, and we've all done it, weeks where you're up and down the country and you're working, you're out and about 12 hours a day. That's not good for any of us. And I think this whole situation has probably made a lot of us kind of just sit back and actually think about how do we look after ourselves as individuals, and as well as making sure that we're successful for our businesses.
Yeah, the time at the time.
I think that absolutely makes a lot of sense. I'm not sure it's entirely black and white though, because for me, a lot of people have been in lockdown and have really craved contact. I don't know what anybody's experiences around this call have been, whether you're on your own, whether you're with family, a bunch of people, but. Although we're all talking, the easiest thing to talk about is we're all going to be working from home. An office will exist in the future, but I think people really do crave human contact, conversations. We talked about collaboration. Yes, you can collaborate on via tools like that, but just to naturally assume we're all going to work from home, I'm not sure that's always the answer. I think Julie makes a really, really important point about people's mental health and mental well-being, because again, I think one key area of collateral damage around what everyone's going through will be how they've coped and how much pressure it's put on individuals. So I see that as being potential real area of concern moving forward, is how well organisations help and support their people now, but also over the course of the next, whatever it is, 18 months, because I think there'll be people who come out of this potentially damaged.
And on that happy note, but it's true. You raise a really valid point. Me being flippant as usual. I do actually think, obviously, for those of you who are employer branding practitioners, I think the opportunity over the next 6 months more than ever before, because I do actually suddenly believe organisations get the value of it. They understand, and a bit like the sort of the well-being fluff that used to be yoga mats, which is a brilliant way of describing it, that a well-communicated employer brand is actually something that's of value, that it needs to be authentic. But actually, there's going to be some challenges around how you communicate that in a more remote setting. Some organisations have always been remote. I mean, GitHub tends to be wheeled out at this point of having a completely remote workforce, and it's been wonderful. I did some work last year with a 90% remote workforce, but their biggest challenge was making that that employee experience real. And then when they try to communicate to the outside world, people tend to hear, "Oh, great, I get to work from home." And as you say, Neil, not everybody loves working from home. I know a load of people that hate it. This forced working from home has not been their choice either. Typically, there's some sort of in the middle, isn't there? That between being forced to work from home and being forced to be in an office, we're probably happiest in that flexibility bit in the middle. So I'm going to thank everybody so much for joining us. I said, this has been the first talent session of the year. It's been the first talent session for a while. So I'm going to say in top order again. So I'm going to say thank you, Neil, so much for joining us. Thank you for writing the blog. If anybody else wants to write anything, do let me know. Just write the bloody thing and send it over. I'm the fluffiest editor in the world. I changed 3 words normally in most things. I didn't change any in yours, Neil. Neil always changes 157 words in mine, but with the words and things. Fiona, thank you so much for joining us. Mark, you're still out online. Thank you much for joining us. Glenn, you were there. You came in the beginning. You volunteered never to speak, but you've been there, which is great. Emma, thank you. Julie, thank you. John, thank you. And Chris has buggered off already, but I'll say thank you to you again. So thank you for everybody. What I'm going to do is this will be available online. It will go back on the Archive YouTube channel as well at some point as well. So you can listen again and share with your friends. But for everybody who's been here today, thank you so much. And see you all. Thank you very much.
Cheers, Martin. Take care.
Bye-bye.